Can you imagine swinging through the city, soaring between skyscrapers, and effortlessly stopping criminals, all with just a flick of your wrist? Oh man, that was the dream. The magic of Spider-Man's web shooters. Like some versions of Spidey that produce organic webs, most iterations of Peter Parker rely on his genius intellect to engineer mechanical web shooters. Have you ever wondered how these web shooters actually work? I mean, what's the science behind them? How does a teenager manage to create something that even real-world scientists struggle to replicate? What's inside that mysterious web fluid? Well, hello and welcome back, Marvelous fans. Today in Marvelous Videos, we're going to dive into the mechanics behind Spider-Man's web shooters, explore their incredible functions, and see if we're any closer to swinging through the city ourselves. Oh, and as usual, before we get started, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like the video.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I hope this works.
What are Spider-Man's web shooters? Spider-Man's web shooters are twin wrist-mounted devices tucked neatly under his costume's gauntlets. They fire out ultra-thin strands of super-strong, quote-unquote, web fluid, which is some kind of chemical marvel that defies real-world logic. No, seriously, scientists are still scratching their heads over how Peter managed to make this stuff in his bedroom. Anyway, the web fluid is stored in small cartridges pressurized at 300 psi, though that number tends to change, probably depending on how much Peter cranked it up that morning. Each web shooter contains a spinneret system made mostly from stainless steel, except for a few fancy components. The turbine is pure Teflon, which the bearings are made of amber and artificial sapphire. You know, casual materials that totally fit within a broke college kid's budget. The web fluid cartridges themselves are nickel-plated brass, and they lock into place with sharp steel prongs that pierce their bronze caps. Haven't you ever wondered how Spider-Man doesn't end up accidentally webbing his own face when he scratches his nose? No? Just me? Alright then. Well, anyway, the reason is because his shooters have a built-in safety system. They are triggered by a palm switch that only activates when Peter applies exactly 65 pounds of pressure. On top of that, he has to double tap with his middle and third fingers to fire. The moment the web fluid shoots out, it goes through a mini turbine pump that compresses and stretches it, making it insanely strong. To be exact, 4 times stronger than nylon. The spinneret system lets Peter control the shape of his webs, meaning he can fire off a single strong line for swinging, a wide net for trapping enemies, or a thick adhesive blob when he just wants to make a sticky mess. The strength of his web is also ridiculous. His webbing can handle 120 pounds per square millimeter, and it shoots up to 60 feet further if he arcs the shot like a pro basketball player. He can make shields, parachutes, skis, rafts, clubs, and even sculptures with enough creativity. How do the web shooters function mechanically? Spider-Man's web shooters are an incredible combination of science and superhero ingenuity, and understanding how they function mechanically only makes them cooler. As I mentioned earlier, the webs are crazy strong. They can stop a falling car mid-air, which means they have to handle not just the car's weight, but also its momentum. A 2,000 kilogram car falling for a second would require a web with at least 39,000 newtons of tension, strong enough to hold up 4 tons. No ordinary material can handle this, not steel, not nylon, not even natural spider silk. The best option would be carbon nanotube rope, which is super strong, but unfortunately, it's not widely available. Now, where does all that webbing go? You'd think something so long and durable would take up way too much space, but Spidey's cartridges are surprisingly compact. A single 20-meter web shot is about the size of a 3.2-meter pencil if rolled up. And for a full supply of 50 shots per wrist, the cartridges would need to extend 7 centimeters above his wrist. Now, this isn't exactly watch-sized, but hey, comic book logic triumphs all. And there's the speed factor. For Spidey to reach a 10-story building, his webs need a launch speed of 24.2 milliseconds. This would have been easier, but air resistance complicates things. It'll slow the web as it flies, which is why a real-life scientist would need a whole physics simulation to get it right. Now, if Spider-Man wanted to web up a bad guy down the street, how far could he reach? If fired at the perfect 45-degree angle, his webs would travel 58.8 meters. But if he cranked up the launch speed up to 40 milliseconds, they could hit targets 163 meters away. That's about 1.5 city blocks. So in short, Spider-Man's web shooters are miniature engineering miracles, capable of launching ultra-strong compact webbing at high speeds with pinpoint accuracy.
Niels Bohr, but Trust me, there's nothing boring.
What is Spider-Man's web fluid made of? You know, the DIY projects I like usually involve slimes, but Peter Parker, the guy invented an advanced high-tech polymer that can support tons of weight, stick to almost anything, and conveniently dissolve when he's done with it. Well, I guess that's why he's the superhero and I'm not. The formula itself is a mystery. What we do know is that it starts as a sheer thinning liquid, meaning it stays nearly solid until force is applied. The second it hits the air, the long-chain polymers weave together to form a super strong, flexible fiber with incredible adhesive properties. The adhesive magic wears off quickly in open air, so after about 2-ish hours, the webbing breaks down, which is perfect for keeping the New York skyline from turning into one big web mess. Apparently, Peter once tried to sell this miracle glue, but companies passed on it because it dissolved too quickly. Imagine being that company executive realizing years later that you turned down Spider-Man's tech. Awkward. Otto Octavius, when he hijacked Peter's body, actually improved the formula, making it so strong it could stop bullets. The web fluid doesn't just vanish for convenience, it actually has to, or else the web shooters would get clogged. Now, because Spidey is a genius, he made his webs resistant to extreme heat. The standard formula can handle 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, but for those extra toasty moments, he developed a version that can withstand 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, that's basically lava-proof. The comics have always been pretty detailed about Spider-Man's web shooters, but not as much when it comes to the actual ingredients of his web fluid. However, the MCU gives us a little peek behind the curtain. In Spider-Man Homecoming, we see Peter casually whipping up web fluid 3.0.1 in class. From what we see, his formula starts off as a liquid, which makes sense given the name web fluid. If you're quick enough to catch a glimpse of his notes, you'll spot some of the key ingredients: salicylic acid, toluene, and methanol. While Peter originally cooked up his formula in high school on a budget, definitely not using top-tier equipment, later versions have shown he improved it with access to better materials. The secret to why no one else has cracked the formula might actually be its simplicity. Scientists trying to reverse engineer it probably overlooked the cheap, everyday chemicals Peter was forced to use. Even his clone, Ben Reilly, managed to mix up a workable batch using $16.50 worth of supplies from a pharmacy. Well, it's not perfect, but hey, sometimes you gotta work with what you've got. How does Spider-Man control different webbing types? Spidey's webbing does so much more than just transportation, whether he needs a sticky trap for bad guys, a quick shield, or even an emergency bandage. Peter's got a web formula for everything. Now, how exactly does he control these different web types? Well, in most versions, his webs aren't organic. This means that not only does Peter invent the web fluid, but he also engineers the high-tech shooters that fire it. The standard webbing starts as a liquid that turns solid when it hits the air. Spidey's not one to settle for just one type of webbing, though. He's a tinker and is constantly tweaking his formula, giving himself an arsenal of different web types for any situation. Need to stop a speeding car? Boom, reinforced tensile webbing. If you need to blind a villain, he's got web balls. If you need to put out a fire, he's got fire-resistant foam webbing. There's even a quick-drying cement-like variant when he really wants to make sure someone stays put. His web shooters aren't just glorified squirt guns, though. I doubt anybody thinks that they are actually pretty sophisticated. In many versions, he's built a control system into them, letting him adjust the webbing's properties on the fly. Sometimes this is done through a dial or trigger setting, letting him select the exact web type he needs. Other times, it's all about pressure control. A light tap gives him a web line, a harder press launches impact webbing, and so on. It's kind of like using a fancy espresso machine, but instead of lattes, you get crime-fighting silk strands. Different Spider-Man universes have played around with how Peter came up with his formula. In the classic Marvel, Earth 616, he figured it out himself. In the Ultimate Universe, he based it on his dad's research. In the Amazing Spider-Man films, he improved on a pre-existing Oscorp formula. Meanwhile, in the 90s animated series, suggested he had an instinctive knowledge of how to make webs because of his radioactive spider bite. What are the limitations of the web shooters? As awesome as Spidey's web shooters are, they come with a few drawbacks. Turns out, engineering your own super strong synthetic spider silk isn't all sunshine and superhero landings. For starters, let's talk about running out of web fluid. Picture this. It's mid-battle, Peter's got a villain webbed up, ready for the final swing, and click, nothing. He's out of web fluid. Now he's just awkwardly standing there while the bad guy stares at him. If that's not embarrassing, imagine running out mid-swing. 1 second is soaring between skyscrapers, and the next he's rethinking all his life choices as he plummets towards the pavement. I guess that's why he carries backup cartridges, or at least tries to. Oh, and also the shooters themselves aren't exactly invincible. They can be broken, jammed, or even stolen. I mean, what happens if a supervillain rips your web shooters off your wrists and uses them against you? Nothing like getting webbed up by your own invention to really humble a guy. Not to mention, the shooters are pretty tricky to hide. If Peter ever gets his shirt yanked off, well, there goes his secret identity. Then there's the real-world logistics. Where exactly is Peter getting all these chemicals for his web fluid? Like I said, he's literally a broke student taking freelance photos, and the last time I checked, super strong polymers aren't in the affordable section of a student's budget. Also, for a super genius, he could just sell his inventions to the military or something instead of barely scrapping by with Daily Bugle paychecks. The man could be making millions, but nope, he was out here hustling for photos like us mere mortals. Another webbing woe is metal detectors. Trying to sneak his shooters through airport security is a pain, so Peter has to get creative, like hiding them in his camera gear or considering alternative materials. So at the end of the day, web shooters are an incredible invention, but they're far from perfect. Peter constantly has to maintain them, restock web fluid, and make sure they don't betray him at the worst possible moment.
It's my web fluid. It's for my web shooters. Why?
Alternate reality web shooters, unique spins on Spidey's signature tech. Spider-Man's web shooters have taken on so many forms across different universes that at this point, we might as well start ranking them like gadgets in a James Bond movie. Some Spideys have kept it simple, while others have gone full sci-fi. Let's start with Earth 65. Gwen Stacy's got it good. Instead of constantly refilling her web cartridges like Peter, her web shooters pull moisture from the air, meaning she never runs out. She can make webs in all sorts of shapes too, like lines, nets, globs, wings, and for some reason, giant web corn dogs. Then in Earth 1048, we have Peter Parker from the Spider-Man PS4, PS5 games, who upgraded his web shooters to be smaller but hold more web fluid. His shooters fire 3 individual strands that twist together into one strong web line, which is great for swinging, shooting single web projectiles, or even spraying webbing to trap enemies. Then in Earth 1610, Ultimate Peter Parker based his web formula off his dad's old molecular adhesive research and built a high-pressure system to launch it. Later, on his 16th birthday, Tony Stark gifted him upgraded web shooters. Miles Morales inherited Peter's original shooters, but S.H.I.E.L.D. later gave him a fresh pair. In Earth 8351, Assassin Spidey went full Hitman mode, teaming up with Wolverine and modifying his web shooters to fire bullets. Yup, web and lead. S.H.I.E.L.D. decked out Earth 12041 Spider-Man's web shooters with all the bells and whistles. I'm talking about holographic sights, cloaking mode, crossbow attachment, taser webs, flash webs, and even one-button parachutes. Earth 71928, Spider-Man got a mini chain gun. This Spidey modified his web shooters to hold a chain gun magazine, complete with EMP, explosives, and incendiary ammo. Palm's sensors let him switch ammo types mid-fight. Batman would be impressed. Peter from Earth 199999 built his own shooters, but then Tony Stark again gave him a much better version. His new web shooters even had a spider signal, because branding is important. In Earth 19747, Squirrel Girl created her own version of web shooters, except instead of webs, they shoot tree branches. Yep, instead of slinging sticky silk, she's flinging foliage. If Spider-Man's shooters ever run dry, I guess he can borrow hers and start landscaping. Now, there's a whole lot more that I haven't even begun to cover yet, but then again, I guess it's impossible to cover them all. Marvel's verdict. Well, there you have it, folks. Now, we all know how to make our own web shooters at home, I think. Kids, don't try to do this without your parents' supervision, and if you do successfully make one, please do let me know. You know, besides the extreme cool factor, Spidey's web shooters really show us how brilliant Peter Parker is. He didn't just inherit powers, he built his own way to become a hero. So anyway, let me hear it from you. What do you think? If you've had your own web shooters, how would you customize them? Would you stick to classic web swinging, or would you go full sci-fi with flame-resistant or even grappling hook webs? And most importantly, how long would it take you before you accidentally webbed yourself to the couch? No judgment here. You live and you learn, right? Let's hear your thoughts in the comment box down below. As always, if you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.